Mr. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor for helping us behind the scenes for the board's broadcast on Channel 20. And I would remind all our board members that we keep track of your questions when we are hearing presentations, and we'll ask the questions at the end. And I would first like to ask, are there any changes or corrections or additions to the meeting minutes? If not, is there consensus to approve? Thank you. So we'll move on to new business, and Mrs. Yar is going to present our first item on the budget.
So really, this is not a full presentation. It's really just an update for the assumptions that we've made since the last time we presented. Michelle Sather had presented that last month. So the first few slides are just really giving you a snapshot of the changes that we made. So we just bumped up evidence-based funding by 0.5%. CPPRT, we had that as a 7% decrease, and based on feedback from the committee, we went with the flat amount. We really don't have any new information from the state. We've tried to get that again today. They are not releasing that yet, but we did come in at flat, which allowed us to fund some of the capital items that we wanted to fund. We had $1 million shortfall at that point last time, and so that allowed us to cover that. If the revenue does not come in where we need it to come in, based on our assumptions, we will make adjustments at that time. We also made an adjustment to IMRF that was an increase that we received from IMRF, so we made that increase. And then we just did a summary of all the budget updates. And the grants are coming in higher than what we anticipated, so we just bumped that up. And that's both on revenue and expenditures. So that was all I was going to really present tonight,
All right,
just those updates. So if there's any questions.
Any questions for Michelle? Mr. Siegel.
Is there any impact from the late arrival of the property tax bills on the budget?
There really isn't. We record half of our tax revenue in each year, so it really doesn't have any effect. It does on our cash flow, but we have a good cash flow position, so we really don't have any issue with that.
Any other questions for Michelle? If not, this will actually be brought back to us on June 25th as an action item because, oh, I'm sorry, Kim.
I just wanted to confirm that you haven't, in these assumptions, you have not included taking new property? Is that?
That is correct. Yeah, we're waiting until the tax levy discussion for that based on feedback.
Okay. So this will come back to the board for approval at our June 25th meeting because it's required that we approve the budget in the first quarter.
Yeah, so the the public hearing will be May 28th, so we'll do a little bit more, we'll do a couple more slides in the presentation talking about the whole budget in total, and then it'll get approved at the June meeting, last meeting of the month.
Good, thank you. Any other? All right, so we'll move on to Dr. Salsas, who's going to present our next two items, College Board for Thurgood Marshall and Pearson K-12 Solutions for Thurgood Marshall.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about a couple of new resource adoptions for Thurgood Marshall 6-8 and 5-8. First, we'll start with our new ELA resource proposal. The problem is really selecting appropriate resources for Marshall that allows them to show growth. It's hard to do that sometimes when students are at the very high level of achievement, and so looking at resources as the curriculum resources have rolled out from the district and looking at those versus other potentially more appropriate resources for the Gifted Academy. So I won't read the slide to you. The background, close collaboration with the curriculum department, working with their timeline originally to choose a resource for the district, and then having the opportunity to have a team go to National Association of Gifted Children and look at some resources there, and then seek out some resources to review in addition to the district resource that might be reviewed for Marshall. So 4 resources considered, as you can see, and this is all in the PDSA that you've had attached for tonight's meeting. The solution determined by the committee together with the curriculum department and I would be to recommend purchase of Springboard ELA resources, integrated reading and writing throughout, meets all the essential learning outcomes established by our curriculum in the district, aligned with PDSA cycles, which is a huge plus, is differentiated, and it's very vertically aligned with our high school gifted academy, which has an AP course in ELA starting in 9th grade. And we did have a high school representation on the committee. The total cost, captured fiscal year 19. It's a 6-year digital license and then resources for students and teachers. And then looking at formative and summative assessments, both MAP and IAR, and again, addressing that need to show growth with our highest level students, really wanting to have curriculum resources that allow them to achieve that growth. And so those are the data points that we'll be using to assess the return on investment for this purchase. And then the focus skills assessments, potentially with some tweaking for our gifted academy students as far as the level, but working with what the rest of the district is also using for the focus skills assessment. So it's aligned with the direction and the curriculum for the district. Supports ELA standards and instructional shifts, as I mentioned in the curriculum, and the vertical course sequence in the gifted academy. And from the gifted strategic plan, goal 1, an aligned dynamic curriculum is one of their strategies. And again, when we set out to do the strategic plan for Gifted Academy, we knew we had a 5-year curriculum rollout, and we would wait and in phases look at special programs as well, and look at whether those resources match the philosophy and the need or not. So curriculum implementation report next spring to instructional council, together with a team from Marshall who will be doing the work. Who helped review the resource here today. And that's kind of the summary of that. And it is very close to the per pupil student expenditure, the district selected curriculum as well.
I think we should take questions on this now, if there are any questions. What do we get for $51,000? What does that include? And it's a digital license, huh?
So you get the digital license and then the hard copy resources as well.
Okay.
For students, right? And then there's a 1-day professional development included, which has already been scheduled before the end of fiscal year 19, of June. That week's in.
And that's for 1 year.
Pardon?
Is that for 1 year? That cost?
The PD is included in the
Okay.
purchase. And then, as new teachers are added, the existing teachers have to determine whether they
So my question really is, so it'll be $51,000
it's a
every year?
No, it's 51,000
One time?
one time, right. And then the digital license is a
Okay.
6-year license.
Okay. Any other questions for Heather on this one? Okay,
Thank you so much.
okay.
It's exciting. We've been waiting to get here to our team from Marshall for reviewing. Next, we have a similar resource recommendation for Marshall 5 through 8 social studies. Worked closely with Corey Nilsson and a team of teachers, 2 of whom are also on the district CLT. And again, it's a similar problem of just trying to make sure that we have a resource that's rigorous enough so that we continue to show growth and achievement both for our highest students. So the resource recommended is My World Interactive by Pearson. The curriculum department selected a resource for social science, special programs, and the curriculum team assessed some alternate resources with the team of teachers at Marshall. And these are the 3 options that were considered for this resource recommendation. And our current resources were not, and it's in the full PDSA, but our current resources were not as aligned with the new instructional shifts, in addition to wanting something that would help support growth for the students at Marshall, so that was not selected. And History Live was the district selected resource. So again, it's aligned with the Illinois Lens for 5th grade social science. 5th grade is actually purchasing the 6th grade curriculum. And then we're working with the Dean of Social Science, Corey, to do kind of a crosswalk for 5th graders between integrated literacy and this new resource, as it bridges them to the 6 through 8. So it's differentiated through both acceleration and depth. And again, total cost captured in fiscal year 19. And this includes the digital license and the books as well. Students. And the teachers have the advanced copies. We have a 3-day, this also includes a $7,200 3-day PD for all of the teachers. And they're actually coming to Marshall at the end of June for the 3-day PD. And because it's cheaper to bring them here than to send people for a 3-day training, we're also able to include our special ed support team, our counselor, other folks who support the students in the school can also attend the training. Again, focus skills assessments, PLC and classroom teacher assessments, and MAP and IAR. You see a positive continued growth. We have high achievement from our Gifted Academy students, but we need to see that growth too. Once again, fully aligned with the new social science standards and the instructional shifts that are required throughout the district. So a lot of that common language that the whole district is using is the same language and the same instructional shift that we want to happen at Marshall. So we're back next year.
Questions for Heather? Anybody? Mr. Siegel.
So there was a new social science curriculum selected for last year, and
Correct.
we're selecting a new one for this year that is more aligned to the state standards and also challenges the students so that they have an opportunity to exhibit growth.
Correct.
I get the growth part. The part about buying a new curriculum that aligns with the state standards, when we purchased one just a year ago, did the state shift the standards
No,
that
this is-
much?
When the resources were purchased last year, they were not purchased for Marshall because we knew in the timeline we would be looking at that and assessing whether we also wanted that. Because we're a large purchaser, we could get it at the same cost per pupil, or if we wanted to select another resource. So it's just that the timeline's a little different. So that's a really good
And that
question.
part was confusing. I didn't read anywhere in there where it was
Right.
purchased for the rest of the district, but not for Marshall.
Right, so that's a really great question.
Thank you.
Ms. McCullough.
So I see that when you bring this back, you're going to bring it to instructional council. So hear that goes to instructional council, then does another report come to the board from instructional council about how well it's working or not working, or what is the loop?
We have instructional council, but we'd be happy. As a matter of fact, I'll be here in a few weeks talking about special programs. I can include it in my annual report next year. If you'd like to add whatever is shared in or it might even be better for a separate date because my special programs tends to be long.
She's on that calendar.
Right, I think what we're planning on doing for the most part with the SA Study Act portion, for the shorthand there, is, and we'll get back to you with specifics, but I think we're planning on largely embedding that into the weekly update to have that be a standing column in the weekly update so that there are opportunities. And then I think if the board wants a deeper dive, you can always reach out to me to request a formal presentation. But I think it'll be pretty overwhelming. I think, Peterson, I think we're at 90 PDSAs we've done this year. So I think it would be unwieldy to have a formal report on all 90. So I think what we'll do is we'll try to have a section in the weekly update that checks back in on all the essay portions of our PDSAs, and we'll probably use board presentations for new materials and ideas that come forward. However, I think we'll work with the board to have a process where if there's something that you really want a deeper dive, that we can have an avenue to bring that forward. 'Cause I'm sure all 90 of them, there probably will be several that the board would like a more detailed analysis. So that'll be a good conversation for us as we plan out next year.
Well, and I appreciate that. We're always told we're reporting back, but there's a lot of things in there. We have to trust that educators know, have gone through the right process to choose the right curriculum and resources, and I do trust that process. But then to see the outcomes on that, sometimes I feel like it just gets lost until it didn't work and a new one comes forward.
Right,
So
right.
that's good. Thank you.
But I'm also always available. I know I got to know some of you pretty well during all the strategic planning special programs, but you're always welcome to reach out to me if you have a specific question. I'm more than happy to give me any feedback. I'm really welcome.
Yeah, I guess my comment is that, we've been pretty consistent that, if you're going to spend money on something, we want to know that it worked, or whatever, so that, did ARC scores increase, did math increase, whatever assessment tools you use or whatever, did this meet your need? Did it raise the level of achievement, I guess, is what we're after. If it did, by how much?
And I would say the onus to put it on us to come back and ask about each of the programs would be a little bit deep, and so that's why it's nice to hear that it'll be embedded in the weekly reports. And yeah.
Okay.
So, because the only time we come back with questions about it is when somebody complains to us, to be pretty frank, or we see a general test score and say, but didn't we get weren't we covering that with this new program? So it sounds like it's covered. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or other comments? All right, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Okay. This will come back to us for an action item at our May 14th, which is next Tuesday. Mrs. Urim is here, I believe, to present Seesaw, which I thought was gym equipment. But
Oh, you're going to love this. It's almost as fun as gym equipment. Okay, good evening. So I wanted to start by giving you, where's Connor? Yeah. Yeah. I would be curious, do any of you have you ever heard of Seesaw? Not as gym equipment, but as
Okay.
a digital portfolio tool. Okay, good.
We figured that. It was not that, but my first
So
thought.
this is a quick explanation, and then we'll dive a little more into it.
Okay.
Seesaw is a digital portfolio that your students will use to showcase what they're learning and doing in school, and share that learning with their teachers, their classmates, and their family. Students love Seesaw because they're able to show what they know with lots of different tools, and share their work with meaningful audiences, all while practicing those 21st century skills. Students and teachers will add photos, videos, drawings, voice recordings, notes, PDFs, and much more to their learning journal from any device. Teachers love Seesaw because they're able to gain insight about all students and understand student growth over time. Seesaw is also a simple and effective way for teachers to increase family participation in the classroom. Plus, all classwork is organized in one place. Conferences have never been easier. Families love Seesaw because they can be closer to their child's learning without being in the classroom every day and are really able to understand how their child is doing. Families can interact with their child's work by leaving likes and comments, strengthening the homeschool connection. School administrators love Seesaw because it gives them a window into everything that's happening at their school. You'll be able to easily see and interact with students' work, get a feel for the activities your teachers are doing with their students, and get access to rich analytics on community engagement and technology utilization at your school. Seesaw for Schools also allows student portfolios to sync from class to class and carry over from year to year. This creates a valuable, continuous record of students' learning at your school. Seesaw for Schools also allows you to centrally manage all of the Seesaw accounts in your school, making it easier for your teachers to embrace using transformative technology in their classroom.
Yeah.
Another video piece is, I wanted you to see a student sample that was done in our kindergarten classroom. So what the video is this is how it would appear for the teacher, and the student generated this. So they were given this picture, and you'll see the overlays of what they did to show what their evidence of learning.
These are the 2D shapes that I know. A blue rectangle. A pink circle. A yellow square. A green triangle. A red hexagon.
Very good.
So for you to understand that this is a multimedia platform that students, and this was just a child, it's just available in the classroom. Some teachers are using it in different ways, but that's just one way that a child could show what they know. I think you have to go back into present. So currently we have 76 active teachers with lots of students accounts going on. We have lots of family connections happening, and this is all based off of what's available free or purchased by a select few of our schools. Over the last 2 summers, we have had some trainings, and that's what sort of helped create this sort of training ground of letting people to see who's interested, who wants to try it, and how's it going. And we've had some fantastic feedback already by parents. It changes the conversation at home. Instead of saying, what did you do at school today? And you get the, nothing. Now you can see and hear and even play back with your child what they read or what they built or what they experienced in a way that then also documents that evidence of learning over time. So we can see and start as far as student goal setting and being able to see growth over time. So that's the kind of things we've been seeing by the teachers using it. But right now, currently, it's not equitably available. It's by whatever teacher has taken the time to get the training, whatever principals have reached out and decided to purchase it for them. But it also has not provided us with a dashboard on the district level that helps us know usage and engagement. And the district dashboard will also allow us to have activities and assessments available district-wide. So now we can have some uniform data in terms of where students are in benchmarking some of those assessments in a very simplistic way, but using the multimedia. We are looking at Google Sites is a great way for kids to start a portfolio. We'd like them to start doing that and creating a Google site, but it's really kind of difficult in the younger years. It ends up falling on the teacher to maintain 30 sites. It's difficult to do, but so that's why we're kind of seeing this is something that's a great avenue in those early years in particular. There is an application called Class Dojo that is also developing digital portfolios, but they do not have near the capabilities that Seesaw has. So there are classes who use it for classroom management, but the portfolio part is not as robust. And we have a lot of paper portfolios going on. A lot of big papers that require paper pencil assessment, require that kind of evidence of learning. And then also, I don't know if you've ever opened up a paper and asked a student a couple days later, a couple weeks later, what was this and why did you do it? It's not nearly as engaging as if you can capture in the moment what they know and what they've learned. District level will also allow us to align to the report card skills. So the things that are being reported on the report card are what we can tag inside the app so that parents can see. Now, if I know my child is, counting with 120 and is getting a 2, what's the difference between a 2 and a 3? Because I can see what my child is doing. So parents have access to only their child's work and can comment and communicate with their child. It kind of becomes almost like a little social media between the child and the caregiver. Total cost will be 72 and a little bit, a little more. And that will give us 3 years of access. And that will also give us the opportunity to see how robustly we can roll this out and how we can support teachers. Our district dashboard will help us assess that situation. We will provide ongoing PD support. It's in the form of, there are waiting lists right now to get into the sessions in August, but we can also provide support on a building level, on a PLC level, that kind of thing. And it will be interesting to see how the stakeholders feel about it when it goes on a wider release. This purchase will provide over 6,000 student accounts. So that's what we're looking at diving into right now. Your questions?
So the intent is for K through 2, is that correct?
Right, and honestly, to be completely transparent, I'm not going to limit it to that to
Okay.
begin with. Like if a third grade teacher's like, this is wonderful, hey, do it, great. We're just seeing that that might be where we land, but we're also gonna take some time to figure that out.
Optional or not optional?
Right now, it would be optional.
Okay.
But what we're seeing is that the people who try it, if they stay on the free, they're like, well, this is okay, but they don't have nearly the robust tools that they have when we get the paid version. And so with the paid version, it's much more motivating and interesting because now it essentially becomes an interactive digital grade book that parents have constant access to.
Mr. Escobedo, I'm going to start with you.
So there's a couple board meetings ago, there was
I'm going to have you move your mic a little
oh,
closer
sorry,
to you.
no, yep, thank you. So a couple board meetings ago, we had a presentation, right, for the all-district app. Why could this not be, why could we not have a feature for younger kids or something within that app?
Yes, we've already talked to communications and want to look into that being a launch from our district app so that so that students who are engaged in CSAW, the parents can just launch right into that.
I guess what I'm asking is not that, but why couldn't we make that app work for our younger kids as well? Instead of buying a separate, so we truly have a unified app for all the district.
If I'm understanding it right, and you can say more, the app itself from communications is not necessarily, it doesn't have the capabilities of a digital platform for curating evidence of learning. So that would be kind of two different things. Where, like our eSchool doesn't collect digital evidence. So even though we can connect them to that, it doesn't give them that information. I don't know, do you want to expand on that?
So I can. So yes, what Susan's saying. So the application we purchased for a district-wide app does not have the learning suite of the house. It's more of a communications utility for parents as opposed to the educational side of the house. This would be incorporated, and there's been discussions with communication on how we do so into the district-wide app. So there is a one location where we can access this application amongst many others that we have in the district currently.
Okay, the other question I had is, so the funding's coming from bilingual and IT. Is there a specific reason why it's coming from bilingual? Just
Yes.
Just we have funding there?
Oh,
or?
no, not at all. They were instrumental in reviewing this and looking at what it could do for their students. The curriculum part, but also bilingual teachers were like, we need our kids to be able to express themselves verbally better and having more practice on being able to do that, whether it's in their native language or whether it's in English. So they saw this as an opportunity to really beef that up in the bilingual classrooms, and so wanted to, braid funding with us to ensure that the bilingual students would have, robust access.
Okay, my last comment is I'm kind of biased because actually as you're bringing the presentation, I was kind of going through my phone and I've used this for quite a few years actually. And just kind of thinking about the use that I've had for many years on that app. Personally, I don't, it seems to me that the younger age, while it'd be useful, I have not seen that much value personally as a parent. And I know I've discussed this with other parents and just the different apps, pin up, pin down, seesaw, all the different tools that we use is just, not consistent. I guess from a personal perspective, it seems to me that the younger kids do not benefit as much, and where their pencil, paper pencil is much more useful and helps much more with their reading, learning strategies. I just have not seen much use of it, to be honest.
Okay. Mr. Connor, you're next.
Okay. I assume this, you mentioned the dashboard, so does this export to our warehouse?
Right now, no. So teachers would still input final grades into eSchool.
So this is a standalone dashboard through Seesaw?
For right now, yes. Right, they don't have integration. We were looking at single sign-ons and different things that might help over time with Seesaw, but right now, no, that's not.
I think I have a more general question, which is, so the dashboard part sounds good. I guess how it integrates with everything else was kind of one of my questions. And it produces the question that, would there be a summary of that, and how would that fit with the other results that we'll see? Because it sounds like that there will be some results that are individually based, and I assume that will summarize up to school level. Not that, for example, we would need the individual, but that summary version. So how would that fit with other similar kinds of functions that we've already got?
Well, like currently, teachers are supposed to keep an up-to-date grade book with assignments. In the elementary school, we've seen that it's a difficult thing to do with all the different things that they're trying to report on. But it also, when you put standards-based grading into our current system, it doesn't necessarily explain to anybody what a 1, 2, 3, or 4 means.
Sure.
So through the digital evidence, we can also attach rubrics, we can attach standards and skills, so that now we're starting to connect what are we working on versus what does it look like when we're learning something. And that's something, I mean, if I can say, that's might be missing if your teacher's using the free version, that there are certain things that they're not able to do in order to convey learning. But I don't really know what they're working on.
Sure. So now, do we have those slides? I thought I looked through and I don't remember those.
It's not in our board pack.
Okay. I didn't think so. Okay.
Sorry.
I think, so I know it's a comment I've said a lot, but I really think that on this one, it's really, from my point of view, not so much the money as such, but if I listen to Mr. Escobedo, and I had some similar questions, it's how does it all fit together? And I know I've really harped on this one, but I think one of the things I'll say in curriculum is just one of those things, and I didn't say this on the All World and so forth. I think there is an element of trust, and so it's like the detailed part you all know so well, but it's hard for me, just speaking for me, to see how it all fits. And so for example, the question of, hey, would this be extended? Is there something else that I know you gave the names of things, but, I'd have to ask, okay, so this will only forever be K through 2, and then you said, no, if they elect it in third grade. So it does introduce the question in my mind is, what's our real target audience for this? And if we don't use the Google Sites, and Google, from my point of view, has its good and bad, I'm not clear how it fits with that. So would we, in 3 years, if Google decides to do this, we'll have Google do it, or we'll have Pearson do it, or I think, so I have kind of a bigger question, which again is back to how it fits. I've got a couple others. I don't know if you want me to just ask them, or do you want to answer those? Okay. So I think one of the other aspects is, so I was unclear whether it was required, And if we're going to have a dashboard, and I think one of the trends that we've got is comparative. So if we're not going to require it, it's going to make comparatives, I would think, harder both statistically and even for some level of analysis to see how we're doing. And one aspect that just hits me right away is if we're going to be looking at our principles more for achievement levels and so forth, that it would be much harder to do that if it's not consistent. So, and I forgot Dojo, which as far as I understood was more on the communication side. So I think I could see the value, and I totally get the video and all that, but it does make me wonder some of the same things Mr. Escobedo said, which is, is there a consistency? So I'm not questioning this tool itself, but I do wonder how it all fits, and, what's the likelihood in a year or two that this will change? And I think that's kind of one of the trends that in my 6 years I've seen. And to one more thing that's related, I think, is will the usage of Seesaw grow, and do we have a path for that? And one quick thing for Mr. Bartel is it looked like this was an international group, so I was wondering, where they were headquartered and where the support was for the things that we're purchasing. So I know that's a laundry list, so.
You want to dive in and answer all those? Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the requirement piece, I mean, it's a difficult position to say to all the teachers, you have to do this, when we have a way for them to report grades right now. And if they don't see a need for change, I can't make them do that.
But is it just grades, if I might? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought the idea was more around progress and really not just the grades, that the value of that was to see the actual homework and to communicate what the students were learning, not just, they got a certain grade.
Can I interject, please? I think what we're getting at here is instead of a top-down change, this is very much a bottom-up user demand change. And what really drove our team to bring this forward was pretty significant demand to be able to use the full capabilities of the pay model at the teacher level. So I think this is a little different than what we're used to, in the sense that instead of running a going to make a district-wide decision and running a pilot, the pilot happened organically, and ultimately pretty massive teacher and student demand caused the desire to move forward. So I just think from that lens, that's a little bit why I think this one feels a little unorthodox in terms of the presentation. It really is a ground-up initiative that really captured desire to do more of that work. So I actually think this is I think it would go against what's worked well in the change process on this type of initiative to mandate it. I think it's really important that we continue to make it available. It also moves us towards our strategy of autonomy at the building level. We are going to be holding our schools accountable for getting results. Our schools have increasing autonomy over their budget. This is something that will be optional for schools to implement and for teachers to implement. And I think what we are going to see increasingly is a group of schools or a group of teachers finding interest in something, getting results, and then that replicating in the system. So I just think it's a different way that this comes before and leads to some of the very legitimate questions about why are we not having everybody use it? But I think in this case, it's really important to continue to let it, it's on a very fast growth plane. I experience a lot of teacher excitement out on faculty visits around Seesaw in terms of the ability to provide a different way to measure student progress and to have students be engaged in that. If you read John Hattie's research, one of the top things that is correlated with increasing student achievement is making sure metacognition is happening, and this is what's happening here. We have kindergarten, first and second grade students who are articulating what they are learning and how they're learning, as opposed to the teacher being kind of the arbitrator of that. So while I'm sure this is not for every teacher or for every family or for every student, I think there's a reason why this organic growth has occurred and why we're bringing it forward.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Connor?
So I totally understand that, the answer. I would have to think about it. What I would say is, I still, one of the basic questions is, how does that fit? I mean, I couldn't second guess the directional part. And if it's really demand-based, I mean, totally understand that. As I said, for me, it's not so much the cost of something standalone, it's more how does it fit. That's why I was wondering about the metrics. And if we're not going to require it, then I think we really do need to understand, if I might say so, then it would imply that the value of the metrics is really just for a classroom, a school, or what have you. It's really not comparative in nature. I mean, that was really, it might have sounded like a comment, but it was really a question.
Where Jason, where are they headquartered? Do you know that? And that was one of Mike's questions.
Right.
Yeah, it's in California. I mean, they do,
Oh, okay.
they are available worldwide, but I thought the base was in California.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's accurate. And all the data that we're collecting, we went through the compliance checklist, just like we do with every other app.
Yeah,
And,
I saw
and
the.
we are, everything is.
It's
secure in the
FERPA
United
compliant,
States.
yeah,
It
et
is.
cetera. I saw the laundry list. It really wasn't from that aspect. It was more the consistency. So I think the one thing is, something like this, if it's truly ground up, then I know I would still be interested in some of the results, but I think you'd have to put some remarks on how it fits. So, yep, that's it.
Well, and to your comment about, your question about the whole, well, like, what if something else, a shinier penny comes along? And you know, I can't look in the crystal ball, but I can say that right now, it is the very best option we can provide our teachers and our students. Google isn't looking at expanding into digital portfolios because from their point of view, that's what Google Sites does, and they have all the tools to do that. It's just, it's not geared toward our earliest learners.
Sure.
In terms of
I think,
accessibility.
yeah, this was, so my general comments, though, is that, you know, big companies tend to buy smaller companies, and that's why I wondered if there was a path for some of these others to, like Dojo, I'm making it up. But
Yeah.
because you said you looked at options, and I'm not saying, trust me, being in software most of my life, I know you can't look forward, but it is more a question of, you know, is it likely? You know, sometimes companies will say, in the next year or two, we're going in this direction, and that was really more what I was thinking.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yeah,
Follow-up.
sorry, I've got questions as well.
Okay.
So one question and then a couple comments. Basically, my concern is that, again, we don't have a unified solution for all the schools, and this, the mobility that we have through our district, you know, you go to one school, and if it's not widely used in another school, it's just the effective, you know, the effectiveness standpoint. The other part is the, you know, how much is this value versus how much is distraction from actually using true proven, you know, paper, pencil strategies. That's my concerns.
Right. Well, and it's not meant to eclipse that kind of, I mean, it's more like to be in balance. This just provides more tools than only paper, pencil. And they're there. They're, you know, we have the iPads, we have the cameras, we have those things.
And,
this
yeah.
brings it together.
And that's exactly my concern. We have a lot of tools in this district.
but it requires a teacher to go to all these different tools and to help and to bring all that information together in a way that this just packages together. And
Okay.
it's a huge time saver from that point of view. A teacher cannot have every student have a device, have one device in the classroom that they're recording and curating on. And teachers will say, well, I take pictures of a lot of things, and that's good. Where are those pictures? Okay, they're on their phone, and that's good, but how are we keeping track of where things are going and how are they being curated? So when you come to your students' conference and you want to sit and look, I want to be able to show you aligned to skills and standards and grouped according to date and evidence of learning, rather than flipping through my phone and showing you some things that your child did. So it's upping the level of what we can do with these digital tools.
Yeah, so that's basically my concern. We have a lot of tools in this district, we're not consistent, and everything takes time to use. So, and there's limited time in a day,
Yeah.
and being efficient with the time we have. My question is, in terms of return of educational achievement, how do you compare this app, say, for example, with ScootPad or some of the other phonics-based, apps or tools that they used in the classroom? I know this is a little bit different, but
Right, this does not provide
what
a
return on
learning platform.
what return on educational achievement will we see from this?
I don't have like a great answer on that one. I don't. I'm not well trained on educational return of investment to be able to define that for you. I can really only go from the heart and from the experience that I've had so far to show the level of engagement from students. And when you increase engagement, you do increase student achievement because they want to learn, they want to show, they want to know more. How to quantify that, I guess it comes down to MAP scores. I can tell you that 2 of our highest achieving kindergarten teachers who have 100% growth in their classes are both really heavy Seesaw users, and their students use it all the time to show what they know.
Okay. Any other, Ms. McCullough?
So the 6,000 subscriptions, is that because we have 6,000 students that are K through 2?
Roughly, yes.
And so when you say you would open it up for third graders or anybody who might want to use it at another level, that's assuming that some of those 6,000 students, those teachers won't be using it, and that's the number. I mean, you came up with that
Right, yeah.
number somehow.
We looked at bilingual numbers, we looked at gen ed numbers, we looked at the K2 numbers, and then the vendor has said that in taking on this 3-year that they will give us up to 10% fluctuation within that. So if we were to go over, it's not a hard and fast number in terms of being able to provide a little leniency on the number of licenses. But if at the end of 1 year, we're like, well, we've only deployed 4,000 and there just isn't the stamina, we're going to reduce our contract for the next 2 years. And that's,
It gives you that flexibility to
thought
do
it did.
so?
I thought it gave us the option to be able to change our numbers.
I mean, they're clearly written in there, what the schedule is and the invoice. I
Well,
don't
we're very
see-
hopeful, but maybe I misspoke. I mean, that was my understanding when I talked with the
Okay.
gentleman, but I'm also not a contract expert either, so. But it's really hard for me to imagine that already having over 5,000 active users, students, that we're going to have trouble hitting the 6,000 and passing it.
That wasn't really my concern. My concern was that you would be going over
Right.
and coming back to us for more money. And not a concern, but a question. I'm sorry, I'll have to send it to you because it just flew out of my head, my other question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Susan and Jason. So this will come back next Tuesday for an action item on our board meeting on May 14th. Thanks. Next is Mr. Phillips on the purchase of property for the Ops Center at 5052 28th Avenue.
Good evening. I'm here to discuss the purchase of a new building that will serve as our Operations Support Center. The current Operations Support Center, located at 1907 Kishwaukee Street, serves as a central location for our distribution facilities and operations. It also supports the Innovative Learning Center. The building is in poor condition and requires significant renovations, estimated to be $3.1 million. During the fall of 2018, the Director of Operations began the search for a new building. The district identified 4 key factors in the search for this new building: size, location, condition, and cost. During the search, the director visited 30 potential buildings at various locations across the district that for one reason or another just didn't meet our requirements. The property being recommended for purchase is located in the East Rock Industrial Park and has the necessary square footage to support distribution, facilities, operations, print services, and storage. A Phase 1 environmental condition assessment was completed at the proposed property. No recognized environmental conditions were recognized or significant environmental concerns were discovered during the assessment. Inspections of the roof, building envelope, building site, and mechanical systems were completed and found to be in above average condition. Building renovations and site development are included in this recommendation. Additional offices will be constructed within the building to accommodate department needs. The adjacent lot will be developed into a fenced parking area for district vehicles, equipment, and employee parking. A request to combine the 2 properties into one plat is currently under review and consideration by the city of Rockford. We do have 2 alternative choices. We could remain in the current location and make the necessary renovations, estimated to be $3.1 million. This does not address our external environmental conditions or our site security issues. Secondly, we could continue to look at other properties throughout the district. To date, as I mentioned, we visited 30 other locations for one reason or another did not meet our requirements. Our solution is, and our recommendation to the board is to approve the purchase of property at 5052 28th Avenue in Rockford and the adjacent lot for $1,690,000 and included building renovations and site development for $810,000 for a total cost of $2,500,000. The proposed building and adjacent lot meets our needs and is within the established budget. The building is large enough to include print services and storage, which will increase operational efficiencies. Purchasing the building and the adjacent lot will remove these properties from the tax rolls. I have included the 2017 Winnebago County tax report in the executive summary for your review. We'll report back on the progress of renovations and moving in our annual report back to the board in January. And finally, our recommendation is to approve the purchase of the building for $1,690,000 and the building restorations and site development for $810,000 for a total cost of $2.5 million.
Questions for Mr. Phillips? Mr. Siegel.
Given the significant renovations required for the Kishwaukee location, if we move forward with this purchase, is there a chance for a sale on that property?
We do have interested party, but we will have to sell this at an auction.
Mr. Rollins?
That actually ties into one of my questions. So because I thought the proposal was that we were going to end up tearing Kishwaukee down. So are you saying that we will end up selling it?
That is our plan, correct.
Okay. And then do we have any estimate, because we'll have to relocate ILC, do we have any estimate as far as what those costs will be?
I know people are looking into that right now. I don't have the estimated cost for that at this time.
Do you have a ballpark?
Actually, I do. I believe, and Dr. Vosberg can confirm this, but I believe we do have the possibility of staying in the ILC building for the following year or moving forward with, I believe it was a $200,000 increase on the contract if we went to a rental model. And then a third option would be where we'd basically have them find a spot, or a third option would be for us to look at other existing community spaces and coming up with another option. But I think the risk factor for rent would be about $200,000 under the contract. Is that correct, Dr. Vosberg?
That's correct. That would include utilities as well.
Mrs. Hoadley, did you have something to add there? Okay.
We have discussed before looking at other properties to acquire, and so I did want to make sure that you guys remembered that discussion. And so there is a possibility of acquiring another facility which would be suitable for classes, for alternative school classes. But one of the other options, we've asked them to look at non-public entities or locations.
Mr. Rollins?
I guess I mean, you know what my point is, that to do a real apples-to-apples comparison on the costs, we would need to know what that cost is going to be, or have some estimate of what that cost is going to be.
Right. So far, the location that they have identified, we believe is well, it might be suitable physically. From a cost perspective, it isn't. So we are helping them identify other locations.
Go ahead. Just to ask you a question. Go ahead, Mrs. McCulloch had a simple question.
Well, it's helping who identify?
ILC.
And our contract says that we have to provide the facility?
No, right now we provide the facility. So we could continue to do that and find a facility, which is an option, or they can find one, is what they've done in other districts. They find the facility and add that cost into your tuition cost.
So we pay either way.
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
but we're not responsible for their facility if the roof falls down, if they get it.
Right. We're not looking at a long-term solution of them staying at their current location at ILC. So it could be just for this next year, because by the time we build out the op center, it won't be until January or so when the operations team moves over to the new facility.
Okay, Mr. Connor?
Maybe you partially answered this, but in our original discussions, if you will, the motivating force on this was primarily the roof and the leaking. So I'm a little surprised to hear. So are you saying that ILC could stay in that building this coming school year?
Yes, it's not ideal, but yes, they could stay there.
Would we not have a risk factor? I mean, that was part, at least as I understood it, that was part of our motivation to move everything else. And I'm struggling with, all right, we've got a bad roof, we have students, not particularly.
That is not the worst
Okay.
part of the roof. The worst part of the roof that's leaking is in the...
Oh, the op side?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's where we have a waterfall.
Okay, I just, all right. I was just imagining that extending that would not be good. And to put this in perspective and as I understood it, 15 people who actually watch.
There you go.
I always say 5, but I was told there's 15, is for them that this presumably, and we have to get the right costs, the motivation is we have a roof problem which is immediate on the operational side, and it's the 3.1 versus 2.5. So, I mean, there's a cost avoidance, if you will, of 600,000 is the net.
Correct, and it's
Yeah.
not just the roof leaks, but also the resulting damage. So floors are buckling where the leak.
Oh, yeah, clearly. But I'm reminding everybody that this is the situation that we're in. I actually have only one real question, which is, when I read through this, I was a little surprised at the building renovation and site development. Is that mostly site development?
There is significant site development in the parking lot area,
Okay.
yes.
So it's not really so much the renovation, because it looked like the reports were good.
Yes.
Okay.
But we have to build out additional office space in the building. There's more warehouse space in this building than there is office at this time.
Yeah, I remember the discussion. I wanted to be clear that the 810 is really, if it's past certain things, this is really development, is what we're doing. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. McCulloch?
Ops moves over when, if we buy this and you renovate?
We're looking at probably the January timeframe.
So they'll be in there half a year anyways. And it has to go to auction because that's what we do with our properties?
You can tear it down or transfer it via an IGA with another public entity, but otherwise you would have to auction off the facility.
Okay. Thank you. This will, let's see. I'm assuming this comes back to us at some point in time. Doesn't say so, it might know, but well, is that next Tuesday?
Come back next
All right.
Tuesday.
Okay, very good, thanks. Okay, now we're on to reports. Dr. Munson's going to report on the school quality survey.
Good evening. I am very excited to actually share our results from our school quality survey. As you recall, the school quality survey went out to all of our parents and guardians across the district. This is the first time that we're utilizing this particular survey, and I'm going to explain why in just a moment. But just an overview, what we're going to talk about tonight is the categories. There are 6 total categories in the survey. They're listed here on the slide, and we're going to talk through just some trends that we see throughout our district overall. The principals have already received their specific school reports, which identifies their areas of strength and areas of opportunities for improvement. And we had a chance to get together with all of our principals to share some best practice strategies on how to share that information with their staff and then with the parents in their schools. This survey was actually given from January 16th to April 9th. And that's really exciting for us because we had control over that window and we were able to set the window across parent-teacher conferences of schools across the district. This is really important because we want to try to engage our parents on opportunities when they are already naturally in the building. That gives us extra opportunities to have those personal conversations and invite them to participate in the survey. However, we did have a response rate of 25%. That exceeds our 20% expectation, but we want to recall that when we look at these survey results, we cannot generalize it to all of our parents. So when we look at the results, we're really looking at the perception of those 25% of students who did participate. We have school quality scorecard goals. We focus on 2 things when it comes to our parent feedback. We really want to encourage a minimum of 20% family participation in every school. That gives us enough research, enough information to get a good understanding of how our parents feel within our schools. Out of that percentage, 33 schools actually did hit or exceed that benchmark this school year. That is a higher percentage than we've received on any parent survey in the past, so we're excited about those results. The school Net Promoter Score was also an area of focus. As you recall, in the spring, we gave our district-wide engagement survey, and we asked the same questions to our staff that we asked in our parent and guardian survey, here in the school quality survey, and then we have some national benchmarks that we're going to talk about later in the survey results. So overall, we had 6,896 parents respond to the survey, and this is the summary of all of that feedback. We also had it translated in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and Arabic. We gave the survey in different modalities. This was also important for our constituents because parents did receive an initial email and several email reminders from K-12 Insight, our third-party partner, to participate, a personal invite to participate in the survey. But they were also able to do paper surveys. This is the first time that we've been able to engage our parents in having a paper option. We kept it confidential by having our strategic process auditors from the Continuous Improvement Department go to every single school weekly, and then as the window got closer to the close, on a daily basis to collect those surveys. They were mailed to K-12 Insight to keep confidentiality. They actually inputted the information for us so that we could see the results online. But you can see the different modalities that we utilized because we were really able to invite parents in different manners across the district and throughout the entire window. But we did find that that paper survey really did yield our highest result. Here is our overall school quality rate. We're excited to see that 83% of our students either feel that our schools are excellent and good. So this is an area to celebrate, and we're going to talk about both sides, what we're celebrating, things that we're doing well, and a couple areas of opportunities for improvement. Respondents also received a follow-up question if the rating was good, fair, or poor. Basically, if they stated they didn't feel their school was excellent, they had an open-ended question that stated, please let us know how we can earn a higher rating. So we had verbatim feedback right from the beginning of our survey. This did yield 500 pages of feedback, which we are absorbing at Cabinet. This is one of 5 questions that turned into verbatims. So across the district, they received about 10 to 15 pages per school. We are going to absorb all of that data and synthesize it. Our researchers from K-12 Insight are looking at an analysis for us, and then we'll take that deeper and read through. I will read all 500 pages. I've already begun, just to really have a good synthesis and analysis of how our parents feel. Overall school quality in comparison by school level, you will see this trend, and this is a research-based trend across our areas. So when we look at our survey feedback, we look at it overall, but then we break it into our scorecard components, which is early childhood, K through 8, and high school. But you will see a trend that as the students get into the higher grade levels, so they move from early childhood to K through 8 to high school, there is a downward trend in perception from parents, and that is seen throughout our survey. So again, these are the dimensions. This is the percentage of parents who strongly agree or agree in these specific areas, and then we're going to break those apart throughout the survey. So the first area is academic support. So you have all of the analysis per question, and again, it goes from strongly agree to don't know. We specifically have a don't know category in here. We do not use that for engagement, but we have a don't know category here because we do understand that some parents truly don't have access to the information that we ask in some of our questions. But what we want to look at is certain trends throughout the data. So one area to reflect on is teachers give timely feedback about student work. That is an area that falls a little bit towards the strongly disagree area, as well as teachers successfully show students how lessons relate to the outside of school. So these are areas that we want to sort of hyper-focus on. Then again, we break down academic support by grade level, and like I said, based on research, we see a downward trend from early childhood to high school on perception in most areas. Again, a little bit more when it talks about how lessons relate to outside life and that teachers give timely feedback is a trend in all of our grade levels. Student support is the second dimension or category. Again, we look at the same areas to try to identify trends or areas that we need to make some improvement on. And then break it down again by comparison of school level, and we see the similar trend. Sometimes where we see the backwards trend would be access, such as the school gives opportunities for extracurricular activities. We see the trend flip. Why? Because we do offer more academic and social activities, sporting events, and things like that as the students get into the upper grade levels, which is a bit limited in early childhood. School leadership. This is, again, our third dimension, whether we strongly agree or disagree in these areas, and broken down again by school level trends. Family involvement, and I'm going through these fairly quickly because we're going to talk about a summative analysis in just a minute. But we see again some areas here as far as family involvement. You'll notice some areas of concern as the school encourages families to volunteer. This has been a district focus for several years since the beginning of our strategic plan, so this is an area of concern for us. You'll see at the end there's a summative analysis from the research perspective, and we saw the same trend when we did our school visits. We did a group of focus groups last spring, and we heard the same thing, that there's some barriers to access for volunteerism in our district. And then family involvement comparison by school level, similar trends. And safety and behavior. One of my favorite things, the one thing that always comes up, especially in schools today, is one of our strengths. Mr. Deal will be excited, is that the perception is the school is safe. This is one of our strengths across all schools and across all areas, that there is a perception that most parents feel that their school is safe. Safety and behavior continued, and there's some things that we don't know. When we look at don't know, it's either they truly don't know, they don't have access, or perhaps we haven't done as strong of a job in communication, in communicating these areas as far as how to access the information or related information in the category. So those are still areas that we want to focus on. And then again, safety and behavior by comparison level. So now an important area is the very last question asked. Students in this school are treated fairly regardless of, and it lists an area of categories. I want to focus your attention on this because based on how parents responded to this question, they were given this follow-up question. Which of the following do you believe, what is your perception that students are treated unfairly? I highlight the N number here because it is not the 6,000, but it is 538 parents who responded to this question. And you'll note that some of them, the equation doesn't equal 100% because they could pick more than one category. So these are the parent perception out of that 8% of total respondents on which areas they feel that there is some unfair treatment. Then we get into the categories, and these are the areas that I always have principals and school leadership and then teachers across their schools really hyper-focus on. There's 2 categories that is provided to us by our researchers. The first is the highest ranking indicators. This is presented very similar to the engagement survey results. This focuses our attention on this specific slide on things we're doing well. So this is the percentage of strongly agree or agree areas across our entire district, across all of the 6 dimensions, the areas that we are doing really well on. So these are areas that we really want to highlight, focus, and continue doing. So this is the perception from parents that we're doing well. So encouraging, they feel encouraged to attend school-sponsored activities, such as back-to-school night. Staff members and families treat each other with respect. There's a teacher, counselor, or other staff member to whom a student can go to help with a problem. The school is safe, and the school is high learning standards for all students. So again, these are areas to celebrate. So 84% or higher of parents believe that these are our strengths. This is the area where we have our discussion. So this is where Cabinet is going to take a deeper dive through this and our focus on our verbatim responses to figure out why parents, and again, the strongly disagree, why they feel that teachers don't give timely feedback about student work, that the school encourages families to volunteer, teachers give helpful feedback about student work, students in the school receive support that addresses their individual needs, and discipline is enforced fairly. So these are the areas that we need to focus on opportunities for improvement and what we can do as a district to hear the voice of our parents and make change in our district. One question we asked that's not a norm-based question is we were curious to know, bless you, what is the preferred communication across our district? And this is their response, that they really prefer email and text messaging over some of the other communication modalities. So this is helpful for our communications department, as well as our principals and other individuals who contact parents on a regular basis. School Quality Net Promoter Score. So we introduced the concept to our district in Net Promoter Score in the fall. Why? These 2 very specific questions give us an idea on the confidence level in both the school and the district from the different constituents that we're asking. We asked 2 simple questions. How likely are you to recommend your school to a friend or colleague? And how likely are you to recommend Rockford Public Schools to a friend or colleague? We asked these same questions in the fall to staff. We asked these questions here. And our Net Promoter Score basically is from a scale from 100 to -100 to see where our confidence level lies. If it is over 100, it means people are actively promoting the district. Pardon me. If it's a negative number, it means there are actually more people that are detracting or talking negatively about our school or district. So our NPS from parents for the school was 23, which is really close to the national benchmark of 24. So we're about right where we want to be as far as parent perception. As far as how likely they are to recommend the district, they're at a -6, which again means that there's more people in our organization, more families and guardians who responded to this survey who are actively not promoting our school or district. And we call them detractors, so people who are not celebrating our successes as much as they're talking about things that are not as positive. So for comparison, if you recall, this is the engagement survey results. And so we look at these side by side because it's important to know how our staff feel and how our students feel. And the principals receive the same information so they can see from their school perspective, what did their staff say versus what did their parents say, to highlight those perceptions. Net Promoter for early childhood, like the rest of our trend data, is higher, as is the national benchmark. So just from the early childhood parents who responded to the survey, really had a Net Promoter Score of 60. Again, our top, if every single parent in the entire organization was celebrating our successes and promoting, we would be at 100. But that's a really high score, and so that's an area to celebrate. The district perception is a little bit lower, but still more people promoting than not promoting at 27. Net Promoter Score for K through 8 was a little bit lower. So we have a Net Promoter Score from the school of 25 with a national benchmark of 30, and then the NPS for schools -6, the same as the district. In high school, a bit lower with our school NPS of 3 and the national benchmark of 2. And then the Net Promoter Score from high school parents at a -14. So why is Net Promoter important? Not only do we want to have more people actively promoting or celebrating our district, but there is also a strong correlation. So if we increase the school NPS, There actually is a strong correlation and a high correlation that we increase both school quality and the district NPS. And we also found in engagement that the individuals, there's a strong correlation between a high NPS in your school and student achievement. So this becomes really important to ensure that we are highly engaged and that we are promoting both the school that we work in, the school we are sending our students to, and the district that we all work in and that we send our children to. So that's our Net Promoter Score overview. So there are some key insights, and some of these we've already gone through. But some areas to highlight is that 83% of our parents truly believe that their children are in excellent or good schools. That is an area to celebrate, but those ratings do decline as the levels go up. 84% of participants agreed or strongly agreed that their child's school has high learning standards for all students, but 78 agreed or strongly agreed that teachers give timely feedback. So that's something we want to reflect on. So what other ways can we really reach out to parents from the teacher's perspective to give some solid feedback on student growth and achievement? Again, we talked about the barriers for volunteerism. Again, another trend that we've seen in our focus groups. And then the other areas we spoke about. Parents were engaged and invited to respond to a couple more verbatim questions. One of the questions were, please tell us how you can earn a higher rating. So if they didn't give us a Net Promoter Score, which was high, so if they were a detractor, if they rated it from 0 to 8 and didn't give a 9 or 10, they were asked a follow-up question to give more opinions, to give feedback on that. If they did recommend us and they were a promoter, they were asked why. So what are we doing why did we receive a high rating from you? So again, we have more information, specific verbatim feedback on what we can do to keep doing what we're doing well, continue to do it well. And then also just the last question that all participants received was, please share any other thoughts you have about your experiences this school year. And anybody who participated could answer that question. Again, it yielded 500 pages, so we're still looking at that feedback, and we're going to look at the synthesis and analysis to make some district-wide decisions moving forward. So that is the end of my results at this point, so I will open it up to any questions or area of clarification that you need.
I'm going to go first.
Please do.
Okay, because my light's already on.
Perfect.
This is a comment more than a question, is because we represent, board members represent the community, you know, we hear from the non-parents or the private school parents that there is a perception of we have unsafe schools. So that, I guess, is a challenge to us as a district and as a board or whatever, that if we're ever going to become the vision of being the first choice or whatever, we've got to somehow prove to the parents of private school and the other non-parent community members that we actually do have safe schools, and that our parents who send their kids to our schools believe that, you know. So that's just a comment or whatever. The second one is a question about the role of the principal. I think I believe that if you have a really truly engaged and successful in communicating principal at a school, you have a higher Net Promoter Score. So from the staff. So is that also true for parents? I mean, if they have a really good principal at that school, is their NPS higher from the parents?
That is a really good question. And actually, there isn't a direct correlation between that one specific area, communication and Net Promoter Score.
Right.
That is one of the domains and categories that can feed into it. But as a standalone, we don't have research that demonstrates that direct correlation. I don't know if Dr. Vosberg can speak to any anecdotal experience.
I'm just wondering whether or not
regarding communication and Net Promoter Score. But from the research, that is only one isolated indicator. And that specifically doesn't have a direct correlation, but it is one component, as you saw in the survey, that communication is one area of both engagement and school quality.
I was just thinking that you guys have seen the individual scores by school,
yep,
which we don't have, but I guess my question is, would you say that the schools that have strong, experienced, high-quality principals have higher NPS scores from their parents?
I haven't looked at that closely. I've looked at the schools. I would say that good principals get good results in many areas, and one of those would be parent support. So, and I think some of that would be contributed to longevity in the building as well.
And it's actually interesting because one of our areas, we weren't highlighted as having an area of opportunity improvement for parent communication, but the area that was highlighted was teacher communication. So that would be another interesting area just to see if it's a trend in our district, and we could look at that. We could look at the areas, within our survey where they noted, stronger communication and if they had a net promoter score, if there was any sort of match. But we didn't look at the data that way, but that would be interesting to see.
Okay. Next, Mr. Escobedo.
So last we talked about net promoter score. There's a lot of discussion, and one of the questions I had, could it be added to the, or I know we have a lot of questions here, but could it be add a question to for the staff? If you have a child, do you bring or if you had a child, would you bring your child to this specific school? And I think you guys said you would look into it. All I'm saying is, to me, that's at the end, that's the litmus test, right? If you teachers truly believe in your school, then you've got a successful school. If they don't, then that's a sign that needs improvement.
And that is supposed to be indicated. So when you ask how likely are you to recommend your school to a friend or colleague, that essentially is asking that question. But I see where you're heading.
Except when you're dealing with your own very children, it's very, very personal.
And we are able to. So this information is norm-based. So outside of the communication question that we asked back here, this is our added question. But the rest are really, there's a norm. So we have a nationwide norm that we can have a benchmark to benchmark our information against, but we are able in any of our surveys to add additional questions. Again, we wouldn't have any sort of benchmark, a national benchmark against those questions. It would just be a national, like a local norm. But we are able to ask, if you wanted that question both in this survey to ask parent perception, if you wanted a perception from staff in the fall, then we certainly could ask that. The other thing we can do is we can focus it specifically, since our engagement survey is district-wide, we can focus specific questions that just go to schools or particular groups of individuals would only receive that question. So if you're looking from the standpoint of your curiosity as a teacher or a principal, if they would send their child to that particular school, we could do that either as a follow-up question or a question embedded in the survey itself.
Yeah, I had asked that last time to be added, and you guys said you would look into it. Again, the reason was to get a feel for what challenges do we have in our schools.
Mr. Siegel.
I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to ask, but it'll come to me, I'm sure, before I'm done.
Great. I love external processing, so you just go right ahead.
All right, cool. Around 500 people had responded with comments suggesting why discipline wasn't fair in their perception. And that makes pretty good sense to me. It's about, 8% of the respondents. But I'm assuming that the 16% who said that they thought discipline in the schools was fair, that's part of the 6,000 plus. I guess the question I'm asking is there a corresponding way to ask that question to staff to see if it matches up? Because it does seem like you had that many respondents and only 16% said the discipline was fair. It was kind of a red flag to me. If it were only the 500 who actually said why, that said that discipline is not fair, that would have been one thing. But it seems like if 16% said it's fair, 84% said it isn't. Seems like kind of a big
discipline is
number.
enforced fairly, that question?
Yes.
So discipline is enforced fairly. Yep, so the 16% disagreed or strongly disagreed that it wasn't fair, and then 15% didn't know. The question I think you were referring to was this one. students in the school are treated fairly regardless of their race, culture, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or disabilities. That yielded the follow-up question, which then yielded the 500 responses.
Okay, could you go back?
Back to the discipline?
Nope. Wait, this one is enforced fairly.
Yep, and then so that's the school breakdown, and then it goes back here. So discipline is enforced fairly out of all the 6,690 individuals who responded to that specific question. 69
Maybe the
of
difficulty in my asking the question is I didn't write down the information very accurately. So my apologies. Apparently, I just didn't.
I think it was reversed. Yep, and so it goes from left to right, to strongly agree to don't know. So yeah, in this particular question, so it looks like for 69% of parents that responded to this survey out of the 6,690 people who responded to that question, strongly agreed or agreed that it is reinforced fairly, or that discipline is enforced fairly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Connor.
Number one is, will we get analysis across these? And it sounded like you had some of it according to the benchmarks. So on a lot of these across the board, I think it would be good to see, virtually all these, and you said that was available.
Yep, so we have the national benchmark right now for the school quality, and we focused on the national benchmark for things that we are looking at in our school scorecard. The researchers are also working right now to provide benchmarks for some of the early indicators, so some of these other areas such as the overall school quality. So now that we're done, we are the last sort of pool. They will give us a national benchmark for districts that have similar size. We're considered a mid-sized district. So we will receive a benchmark for the overall school quality as well. Yes,
Well, all I was going to say is that and I realize there's limits of staff and many other things, but the more things you have that have that, I think the more valuable that will be. And related is, my comment is, man, I wish we had this from 10 years ago so we could compare. That would be one of the things I would love to have.
But we will have 10 years from now of this data
Well,
to
we
follow.
will,
This is our
yes, we will
benchmark.
have longitudinal going forward, but it is
is a great
going the
benchmark.
other way is, anyway, but I wonder if the K-12 folks, so if we have comparative districts and, the demographics are the same, and we have a certain relationship now, at least we could see what were they, and all the situations are different, but I'm wondering if there are some wider trends that we could have. I think the other thing is, am I hearing correctly that we will not get it by school, these results?
So we provide, at the board level, we are providing the district overview. Each of the schools have received their own results.
I understood that.
For analysis.
I'm talking about the boards.
What we will receive, so when and we're going to talk about this at the next committee of the whole, we're going to provide an overview of our updated school scorecard. And these indicators are what we are asking of all of the schools, so specifically these two areas. And there will be information provided publicly on these areas in the scorecard. So you will receive information for the participation rate of all schools and whether they hit that 20% or not, and the school net promoter by school. So this is information that will be provided per school.
We'll get
because they're
this, but
indicators
we
in the
won't,
scorecard.
it's.
Yep.
You'll be able to look at every school and see how they
Yep,
On these,
correct.
but not on everything.
Are there specific areas in here that you'd like to see a school-to-school comparison?
I have to say, I need to sit back and look, but I think that if I were a betting man, that it's going to go fairly widely around the mean, and it would be kind of nice to know. But I understand that this is why it would be sensitive. I just think, I don't know what to ask for yet, to be honest.
And I think that's fair in a benchmark year. Whenever we do something for the first time, I think that benchmark year gives us that baseline information.
understand.
And we haven't had a chance to respond. We're still disaggregating data.
Of
I think
course.
it's fair to ask for trend data once we have an opportunity to absorb the
Yep.
information,
Yep.
truly action plan and goal set to see change over time.
I think that would be helpful to at least understand a timeline that would be behind that kind of analysis, because there was a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
As I went through this. I think one of the things that also came to me was we're benchmarking by size and all, which I know makes a difference. But do other schools in, a 20, 30, 40, 50-mile area do similar? I mean, do we have other public publications of similar schools so we could see how we compare?
So there's a national benchmark of individuals who take
Right.
this particular survey. We fall in what's called a mid-sized district. We're actually at
Right.
the top of what is considered a mid-sized district. There
Right.
are not other mid-sized districts that take this survey in the state of Illinois that match us. There are other schools that take it that fall into the low
Right.
performance, but they would have a different benchmark than we do.
Yeah.
There are areas that match, not an equal match, but that are equivalent in both size and demographics across the nation that fall into this pool.
Yeah.
And those would be areas that we are benchmarking ourselves against. Yeah.
Okay.
So what ends up happening?
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Dr. Munson, I think what ends up happening is the larger the school system is, there typically is a downward trend, and so it becomes not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Sure.
Particularly as you compare how people feel about the district. So.
I really appreciate all that. I think I'm more looking at this from comparatives, because we do so many other things, whether it's fair or not, frankly, on comparatives. I think the only thing I'd like is to make sure that, and I would trust that your team would come up with ideas on what makes sense for the comparatives. So as you do this, having advice from the team on what might make sense also, because this is one of those things where when I see the numbers essentially go down across the levels, and some things I find are truly puzzling, like the question that they tie it to practical life, and it goes down as you get up the grades, which is kind of the opposite of what I would expect, right? It's a little harder when you're little to show how it relates, and as you get older, that should be a higher number. So some of these results, I'm curious, but I will just say, as part of the stats fanboys here, that I would really like to see as many things as you can get out of this, and particularly the comparatives from K-12. I really, yeah, that would be helpful, and recommendations, if I might say so.
Thank you.
But this is real helpful.
And you'll see that we're focusing more and more on national norms, national benchmarks. You'll also see some local norms and some other things that we're going to use to provide a richer amount of information for comparatives as we move forward with our high level of accountability. So yeah, that is something that we do ask. And we have national norms as well for our surveys, all of our surveys through K-12 Insight. And that does give us a fair comparison. We kind of know where our target is. So that's
I
very-
forgot, sorry. The last thing is on the 500 pages. And I know, I'm a stats guy, I should know this, but the one where they have the size of the words and,
Oh, the Wordle?
Wordle, yeah.
Yep. So we actually don't
Are
do a
we
Wordle
going
because
to-
we don't ask that specific question. So the reason we were able to do a Wordle is because we asked the specific question, what one word would you use to describe the district? And so, or your school. And so that's how we were able to do a Wordle, because they only choose one word.
Okay.
With 500 pages, I can't even imagine how many characters that would yield. I don't think we have a paper big
Yeah, yeah,
enough
yeah.
to actually do a
Well,
Wordle. Because we don't
actually-
leave out words and Wordles. So
actually,
that would
as
be a
a-
really large poster.
Actually, as an FYI, we have done similar things for customer focus groups, where you don't give them one word, and you look for, because, yeah, there's text analytics.
Yep.
They'll go out there and find trends.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
for
Actually,
similar
they're doing a
words.
thematic
Good.
analysis for our 500 pages. They use
Good.
SPSS to do truly run it through
Oh, okay.
a statistical analysis, and they will provide themes to us, not words in a Wordle,
Sure.
but specific themes for us to look at, and then we'll dive deeper into what
Okay.
those themes mean.
And I
We
know-
did the same thing with our engagement survey. We did that and came up with the 3 categories of focus. So we
Oh.
did that thematic analysis as well for our engagement. Because
Cool.
it's 500 pages, the researchers are going to do that for us.
Okay, well,
So
no, I would
we'll
expect.
have that. We will
Yeah.
have that. And we'll respond, we'll have a district response as far as what we're going to do, how we're going to share this feedback, because we want to thank our parents for truly responding
Yeah.
and taking the
Yeah, yeah.
time. So we want them to know we heard them, that we are truly taking their, valuing their feedback and analyzing their feedback, and we're going to use it to drive change. So we'll have a response as to what we're going to do with the feedback that we have, and, we can include those themes as well.
And I assume SPSS is the K-12 standard?
No, SPSS is a statistical analysis
No, I know what
program.
it is.
Oh, okay,
I'm
yeah.
asking.
They're doing it, not us. Yeah.
That's right. So that's K-12's
Yeah.
standard is SPSS?
For that one, for their thematic analysis, yes.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Escobedo.
So you just alluded to something, but what specific changes or actions are going to come out of this data to improve our schools?
Correct. And I can't answer that today because we've just received the feedback and the data. So we just shared it with principals. I just shared it with Cabinet last week. You are just hearing it today. So we have a commitment in Cabinet to go through this in a series of conversations to really absorb the information and to look at that thematic analysis, to take it deeper, to hear truly what it is our parents are telling us before we can action plan. So that is already on our docket.
Mr. Escobedo, just to give you an example of what we did with the teacher feedback in our action planning process, we identified through the 107 pages of survey along with our survey results, we focused on areas for improvement. So our area of focus this year from a survey question standpoint, and then this became the source of my rounding, was the district's words and actions match. And only 37% of teachers felt that way 2 years ago. This year we were up to 40%. We still thought that was way too low. We then took 107 pages of faculty feedback, narrowed it down to 3 large categories, which were constantly mentioned over and over. One was professional development. The second area was recognition. The third area was communication. And then when Earl and I go out into the buildings, that is the second question I ask during rounding. As I introduce what we did to analyze the data and how we came up with that, all of their heads nod. Mary sees it in action very often. It rings very true with them, and then they spend about 15 to 20 minutes of my visit giving examples of what it would look like if we were to improve our communication, if we were to improve recognition, and what it would look like if we were to improve professional development. We then take action based on feedback. So there are 3 or 4 things in each area that we've been able to glean that change practice. We will go through a similar protocol with the parent survey data and really hone in on a mix of survey data, quantitative data that concerned us, probably highlight 1 or 2 greatest area of need kind of questions, and then follow up with the qualitative data to fill in the gaps and provide additional context. So I think it worked really, really well this year with the teacher data, and we're anxious to dive into this. But we didn't want to sit on this. We wanted to make sure we got it to you even before it was processed, when it was kind of hot off the press here.
Just to give you an idea, we do the same activities with the principals, but we really focus and heavily focus on this area because this is where the researchers are telling us to focus on. So we start with the lowest ranking indicators, and we walk Cabinet through the same activity that principals do, which is based on these areas, let's highlight 1 or 2 areas as opportunities for improvement, and we walk them through a brief root cause analysis to ensure we take it deeper into the why. Why do we believe this perception exists? And then we action plan. So we will actually create an action plan to drive change based on the perception of the parents that responded in this feedback. So we will do that same thing and bring in the thematic analysis to give us a little bit more clarity on the perception of the parents that responded. So we do this with principals. We did this with the engagement survey both last year and this year, and we'll do the same thing with this survey as well. We spend a lot of time on our survey feedback. So just to give you a perception too, like for the engagement survey, we spent 3 Cabinet retreats focusing just on the data and action planning. So we focus a lot of time specifically on perception of parents and staff.
I'm just going to make a suggestion to those that supervise school buildings that for hardwiring the improvement process, there should be, to me, if I were the principal of a school, I'd want to pay attention to what we did well, and I'd want to celebrate that with my staff, that we did really well in these areas, and we're going to do whatever, we're going to do staff recognition or whatever. And then for the things that we didn't do so well, I'm going to put action plans or action steps together to get to Mr. Escobedo's point of here's what I'm going to do and here's what we're going to do in this building to improve the issue of whatever they are, okay, in our building or whatever. But the hardwiring is the supervisors of those buildings would need to routinely check in with those principals to say, how's it going with your action plans on A, B, or C or whatever? And that way It's an accountability connection, I guess. That's what I'm going to suggest. I don't know if that's what you're thinking or. Okay, all righty, okay.
Yeah, for the engagement survey, we actually had checkpoints. So we had different points where we brought principals together to share their successes and share their challenges. And then Dr. Vosberg can speak as to the, steps beyond that. But we do have checkpoints to ensure that when we action plan, we're authentic to the process. So we do have some areas where we do check and connect.
And we also communicate back out to the teachers with the engagement survey. You said this, and this is what we did differently.
Okay.
So it was communicated that we valued their input. Hopefully that'll, keep participation rates high for the next survey. So I think we could replicate that with parents as well.
Okay, good.
And I just do want to share, since we have parents in front of us, your voice and your feedback truly does matter. And it is a struggle. This is one of our greatest challenges, is to get parents to respond to the survey. Again, I think our practices in the past is perhaps we haven't done as diligent of a job to do things with the survey that we receive. So I truly can tell you that we're committed as a district and as each school to value your feedback, to absorb the feedback and analyze it, and then do something to drive change in both the schools and the district. So I do ask you, please, when we do this survey again next spring, please participate, and encourage others around you to participate. 25% is a really great response rate. I would like a far higher response rate from our constituents to really, truly hear from as many parents as we can. And if you didn't respond to the feedback in the survey and you still have some feedback to share, please let me know. We are always listening.
Cool. Mr. Rollins.
I apologize.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I want to meet with you after class and hear your specific feedback.
Do grandparents get to do surveys?
So
Probably
we
not.
do ask that the parent or guardian do respond. I will say, though, we did invite feedback through public modalities. So we did have a community newsletter that went out with a live link, and we have it on our website. So we didn't discourage anybody. And again, we don't know who responded, so thank you, Jim Rollins.
Well,
we
and
don't know who
I was
didn't
going to give you
respond 'cause it is
kudos for
completely-
your response rate was
Yes.
better than
It is, yes.
than you thought it was going to be. So
It is, and
kudos
actually,
to
I
you.
should celebrate some successes from the schools, because this is really a difficult area for us, and having, again, the large window was helpful, having all of the parent-teacher conferences, but the weather was really difficult. This was the time period where we had, I think all of our snow days, so parent-teacher conferences had to be rescheduled, and parent nights had to be rescheduled, and we know anytime we reschedule an event, we have a lower participation rate. So I celebrate the success of schools in making this happen. We had a lot of really fun things in place, but the principals and the leadership and the teachers at the school were really innovative. So they did incentives. They did incentives for families, for students. They offered prom packages. They offered, a waiver in, wearing uniforms for a day. One of the early childhood schools brought in Walmart, and they donated a bike or 2 bikes to auction off for parents who participated. So we did a lot of really creative things to truly encourage that feedback. So I really celebrate the schools.
How
Those
long
schools
does it
that-
take a parent to fill
It took
out?
less than 5 minutes, so I took it multiple times.
Okay.
The longest it took me was 2.5 minutes. It was a little faster online than the paper and pencil, although the questions were the same. So it really, truly
I
is
only
under 5
asked
minutes.
that because I think
Yep.
most people would say, I don't have time to do that.
I
don't
will
have time
say,
to do-"
though, unlike the engagement survey, if you did receive the verbatim feedbacks, there wasn't a character limit. So for some people, it did take longer. So we do have a staff member who, as a parent, took it, and she said it took her about 11 minutes. But she was very thorough with her feedback.
Okay.
The average parent, we went to 2 schools and helped on parent-teacher conference nights. So we were able to facilitate several parents taking it. So I timed it, and the longest it took was 3 minutes. So it truly took under 5 minutes.
Mr. Escobedo.
It seemed like it took me a lot longer.
Okay.
I'm sure it's because you were thorough.
But a really quick
Thank you.
comment, back to, Mr. Scrivano's point, it's absolutely where I was heading. That's really, and the point is not just to say, drive actions, but also as you driving actions is publicized with the parents, right? So they see that there's an assessment and there's actions taken, and next year they'll be more inclined to take it because they'll see that there's action taken.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McCullough.
So it would be easy to see programmatically if we have special programs, Marshall's at their own school, Montessori's at their own school, but we have some other programs throughout the district, special ed, bilingual. Is there information teased out from those to see what kind of parent, or does that?
This particular one was just for the schools. So it was feedback for the school from all constituents that went from the school. So we didn't break it apart by demographics or by special programs or even by grade level. So it was truly school specific. So every school received a report with all of their information.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We don't have any petitions or communications. I just want to, I wanted to report to the board that we haven't done this for a while. We used to do this every year when I first got on the board, but the board president gets to choose seating arrangements for board meetings. So, so I have, effective next Tuesday, where you sit, you'll need to look to see where your name is. So I rolled the dice, had all the seats assigned, I rolled the dice, and so I have it, and Laura has it. And, but, so for next Tuesday, come and look and see where your nameplate is, so. I know.
I just hope I'm still up there.
All right. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but Dr. Jarrett, you had said that you were going to follow up with the PD issues that came up on Friday, and that you might have them by tonight or whatever.
Yes.
But so, is anybody else curious about that information?
Yes.
Okay.
So Mr. Zediker has been getting feedback. We had 3 key team members that were at the Erickson Institute, which is why they're not here tonight. But so we will have a formal email that will come out. But I think Mr. Zediker would be very comfortable sharing some of the high points from the email. There were basically, to frame the issue, there certainly were a lot of positive things that occurred, but there were 2 primary concerns. One was there were some teachers that had problems with registering on May 3rd for the August 28th and 29th Institute Day sessions. So there was some frustration that came from that part of the SIP day. The other part of the SIP day that was a problem, we had an isolated group of high school teachers, and we actually received a letter to the board with one complaint in that area. And basically, the group that was impacted were high school teachers who were not teaching a course that has been revised last year or this year. There was a group where there was a communication breakdown, where there was a thought that that the school level leadership was in charge of setting it versus the district level curriculum team to address that. And so that was somewhere, we're still narrowing that down, but somewhere between 60 and 140 people that were impacted out of about 1,900 on the second complaint area. It was certainly, as far as we know, there were no issues with elementary, middle school, or the rest of the high school teachers. We're going to nail that down. We're going to have a specific communication from Dr. Vosberg and the team directly to the teachers that were impacted on that front. But I think Mr. Zediker can share some of the big takeaways in terms of improvement as we move from what used to be basically our historical practice was one of 2 things for school improvement days. Either we had a massive convocation and brought everyone together, or we completely distribute it to the schools and let each school be in charge of that. And what both of those models have in common is that they are very easy to implement. Last year, for the first time, we tried something very different. We had much more an approach based on faculty survey data. We attempted to create hundreds of individual sessions in 3 school buildings, and we allowed the registration process to start in July, and we had a bunch of logistical problems that we are attempting to work through before next August's Institute Day. One problem was we had some parking issues. I'm talking about last year's Institute Day. Another problem was we had a lot of people on waiting lists, and another problem is people hated registering in July. So the good news is we're working on this in May, and we are committed to making sure everybody is in a series of meaningful sessions prior to June 4th. The work of doing this on May 3rd was not meant to be the end-all be-all. It was day 1 of a month-long process to make sure everybody gets scheduled. A lot of folks were frustrated because of some logistics that Mr. Zediker will talk about that we're going to be working through. But we want to assure faculty and staff that we are deeply committed to making sure that everyone gets a high-quality series of 3 professional development experiences on the 28th and 29th. Everybody will be in their building on the 30th, on August 30th as well. But I think there were 3 or 4 issues that Mr. Zediker wanted to share. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it really boiled down to two large issues. One was the accessibility of employee online on that day, when staff tried to go in to click on links that were provided in the catalog. So there was a series of emails. There was an email sent to all staff 2 days prior from registration to give a snapshot what the titles of the courses would be and where they would be held. The day before registration, so on Thursday, we sent a PDF version of the catalog so they could see a deeper understanding of what each session was going to be, a larger description. In the email I sent to board members, we hoped that this would elicit some conversation Friday morning during Institute between administrators and teachers in terms of personal, professional things they wanted to take a look at, and then what the building was looking at in terms of goals and initiatives and how they might break out teams of teachers and content area. We then sent the catalog with live links at 9:30 a.m. So one of the pain points, if you will, with members is that when they went to register for some classes or sessions at 9:30, some were already full. What we did not have control over is as the clock struck midnight on Friday the 3rd, that system would allow a teacher to actually go right into Employee Online and register for a course without going through the catalog. We found teachers registering as early as 5 a.m. Friday. And so when the links were sent out through the catalog, you would go to click on the link to register for a specific session, and it was already full. And so that was frustrating for staff because of our email communication where we said it would go live at 9:30. We didn't realize that we would have some members kind of go through the back door per se to register. So that was one pain point. What we found on that is really there are 2 to 3 sessions, specific sessions that are really high in demand. And those sessions revolve around MTSS and specifically some domestic battery and sex trafficking and I guess education and learning, as well as some other trauma-informed care. Those are high-end demand sessions, as well as ed tech. So Google certification, Seesaw, some of those others. Those are our major areas where we have folks that really want to get into those sessions and to attend those over the 2 days. The process that we had set up for that is kind of a two-pronged. Number one is in our Employee Online session, you have the ability to not allow a session to be overloaded. So if the max capacity is at 25, you can set it at 25 and nobody else can essentially register for it. Last year, what we found is we waitlisted folks to see if we could open up other sessions. That caused confusion on, did I get in, did I not get in? And so in the system, you have the ability not to create a waitlist as well. During registration on Friday, the system allowed both in some sessions. We don't know why. We have software tickets into eSchool to determine the reason for the glitch in the software. So we do have some, sessions. For instance, a couple of our ed tech sessions are 160% full because the system continued to allow people to register after the max capacity. So that was an unforeseen issue that we'll be addressing. The other one, what we created to avoid the wait list is a swap request. So we created a Google form, so if you went and wanted to attend a specific session and it was full already, you could fill out a form that was going to be sent right to the talent development team so that we could get the data to take a look at where are our pressure points, where are the sessions that people really want more of, and how can we work with subject matter experts or others to potentially open up more sessions to ensure that we have facilitators and that we can offer that PD. Up to today, we had 70, I believe up to 75 swap requests that we have. And so we are beginning to work through that process. So IT and IS are aware of the bandwidth issue in terms of Employee Online. The talent development team has all of the data in terms of who has registered so far into courses, and we are working with our Ed Services team, curriculum, college career, to see where we might be able to make some adjustments and then reach back out to the staff that are going to be impacted. There isn't a guarantee that you will get everything that you want because we just may not have enough facilitators. We may not have enough people to lead all of of the sessions. But that's the work right now. And so as we take on the next couple of weeks and work with different department heads and leads to create maybe alternative sessions, communicate with staff in terms of option 2, option 3, by the time June 4th rolls around on their last Institute Day, I would venture to say that over 90% of the teachers should have all 4 sessions actually, 2 each day, before they leave for the summer. We've also worked into our onboarding sessions with our brand new teachers. That part of their onboarding session is to sit with a member of our talent development team, open up the catalog, and choose and select their Institute Day sessions as well. So our new teachers will have that selected too as they come back to us on the 28th and 29th.
So part of the frustration that we heard, I think, was that, people at 9:30, which it sounded like they crashed the system because it was just so overloaded that they actually got nothing done. And that's because they couldn't get in.
Yeah, and I think part of, as Dr. Jarrett alluded to, our kind of continuous improvement around not only developing the courses and what those 2 days look like, but the process at which we allow people to register for is something I think we need to continue to reevaluate. Number one is how can we set it up so that at 12 midnight it doesn't automatically turn on and allow people, and that I think will help with the bandwidth. And I think the other piece is this. I guess anxiety that Friday the 3rd was the only day you could register. And we had communicated the whole week up to the 4th saying it was open from May 3rd all the way to June 4th. So we left a full month for folks to be able to get in and out, look at sessions, register. And so I think there was this kind of new approach that it was, if I don't register on May 3rd, then
the course
it's all gone. And I think some faculty and principals, delayed some of the other things they were going to do during that to wait. And I think, as we learn and how we can communicate with our principals and administration is, there's plenty of time to register, move on with the rest of the agenda and come back. So I think those are all learning pieces in terms of this anxiety over a one-day registration.
Okay. Mrs. McCullough.
But it's not just, I mean, I'm so disappointed. We had a year to get this figured out. We kind of fell short last year. Now here we are again. Some of it sounds technological with eSchool. Well, we didn't have a conversation about that with them. The other part of it is people. Teacher or your facilitators walking into the classroom with those high school teachers and just handing them a paper and leaving. That was incredibly, there's always 2 sides to a story and how that really happened. But when I hear you saying, yeah, they had more than one day, and yet those going in and some of the classes were already filled, of course they felt like they had one day. If there were classes they really wanted, they wanted to be on board to get those. And those are people who are really invested in, they're not the people who are waiting until the last day and taking what's left over. They really want to participate in something that is important to them or that they feel will impact their ability to be a teacher. So, yeah, you've got, it's just, as a board member, I'm just really disappointed in the rollout on this again, that we didn't get it right.
Well, I would just ask that you evaluate our performance on August 28th and 29th. We have a month before the school is out to add sessions and to meet people's demand. We did learn some things about what the system can and can't handle and how we have to set piping and bandwidth to make sure that it can handle this. I certainly applaud the teachers' enthusiasm for wanting to do this. But again, we are trying something. Part of our learning was we aren't doing this in July when we have no feedback loop. We're doing this from May 4th to June, or May 3rd to June 4th so that we can get it right before people leave. Evaluate us on June. We will come back to you and let you know how we're doing on June 4th when everybody leaves. And we will very thoroughly survey the faculty to find out how they feel about August 28th, 29th, and 30th. I am confident that there is still plenty of time to show that improvement. There is no doubt there are a number of people that had a frustrating experience with the tech. But we set this up so that if they had a frustrating experience with the tech or didn't get the class they wanted, we have a month to now go back to the REA and say, hey, there are 10 of you that have expertise in trauma-informed. We need to ask you to step up and lead some additional sessions so that we can meet demand. It's impossible to know exactly what the demand is going to be. We surveyed everybody, but there's no way you can know what 2,000 people are going to register for. We offered over 200 sessions for people to choose from. There's a wide variety, but people are going into classes largely of 25 to 30. The easy way to do this would be to throw 600 people in an auditorium and call it good adult learning. We aren't doing that. We are committed to class sizes of 25 to 30 in good adult learning environments where discussion can take place and high quality learning can take place. We know this is not a finished product. This is iterative. This is going to be significantly better than it was last year, but not perfect. And I for one, refuse to go back to what is easy in order to do what is convenient and easy in lieu of what's good. So I completely think we deserve all of the criticisms about a frustrating May 3rd, but the good news is that has nothing to do with August 28th, 29th, and 30th. I think Dr. Vosberg can probably speak to the communication breakdown with the high school side in terms of what we're trying to do to make sure we address that, because that was a separate issue on the 3rd that we do own, and we collectively as an organization want to make sure does not happen again. And it just had to do with a miscommunication about who was in fact in charge of providing the professional development for that group of teachers, and we make no excuses, we own it.
Sure. So there was a group of teachers that did not have curriculum changes the last 2 years, and that was about 150 teachers. We did have a meeting May 19th with the high school principals, curriculum teams, continuous improvement team.
March.
I'm sorry, March 19th. And had a conversation about what we would do with those teachers, took notes at the meeting, and then just had some miscommunication. So I facilitated the meeting, so I own that. I should have probably double-checked prior to the 3rd, and I did send out an email to those staff members acknowledging the mistake. Aside, a benefit of that work, though, we did get those teachers together, which doesn't happen often. English teachers from the 4 or 5 high schools in a room together that teach the same content area. Once they realized that we didn't have what we were going to provide as a facilitation guide and identify a facilitator, which would have been a teacher. Once they realized that we didn't provide that, we had teachers step up and do the work on their own, and we did get some good feedback that they had some really good conversations and they enjoy problem solving across the district. So hopefully we can do that more often, but with better planning.
Mr. Rollins.
I guess, well, I'm not going to add too much, but I mean, the silver lining here is that our teachers have been pretty critical of the professional development that we've offered in the past. And the reason that they're so, I think, we're so upset about this is because they care about these courses. They feel like for the first time that we're actually providing professional development that they care about and that's useful. So that's the great part. I just think that, maybe in retrospect, but maybe even looking forward. So anytime you're going to tell 2,000 people that they can go online at 9:30 and do the same thing, that's probably, what could possibly go wrong, right? So probably we need to think of a different system going forward.
We did ask that. So and this is just as part of the process, our talent development team did reach out to ISIT with some very specific questions. And obviously there was some misgauging on the effectiveness of our system. We dove in a little bit further with Power School, and I'm just receiving this information today where our employee online, which is a part of Business Plus, because it's a small part of Business Plus, Power School eventually is not going to continue to update and support it. And so I just found that information out. So as we move forward, we have to evaluate the software around professional development, how we house and sign up for things. So that is something we're engaging in terms of conversations to prevent these types of issues.
And then my last comment is so much of where we fall down, I think, is in communication. So when we do this, again, let's just make sure we have a clearly communicated set of directions, and not just to the individual teachers, because they're busy. They don't always read their emails, just like I don't always take the surveys that get emailed to me. So make sure there's somebody in every school that knows exactly how this process is supposed to work, so that they know that they're supposed to do a swap form or whatever it was called, or that there will be multiple opportunities to sign up in the future. Because there was a lot of hand-wringing, and then, there were resolutions coming out, but I don't think people really knew about how to do it ahead of time.
Ms. McCullough, did you have another comment?
Well, I'm just thinking, can you also think outside the box, other ways to do it? I mean, at one point in time, we had choice in this district. Now, families put down their top five and, everything went into a system and they came up and we did what we did. It shouldn't have to be, like going for the concert tickets, and some are better than others at that. And they have it looping on this device and this device. So I just think it shouldn't be that way, and maybe people would feel like it was a fairer process if we looked at a different way than just who's there first.
Yeah, we've already
not
begun
a
those
bad
types of
idea.
conversations. We've
Here's the
talked
top
about
five.
trying to do it like we do master scheduling with Simple Tally in terms of, hey, here are some offerings, how many people would select this to kind of drive some of that. So we've begun that conversation, but until we actually go through this for the next month and then execute, then we can really have some takeaways, certainly from the board's perspective as well as the staff's perspective on how do we continue to make this better.
Is there follow-up communication from the administration to all the teachers?
Yep,
about, we heard what your issues were, and here's what we're going to do to fix it. and
I
all that
actually
kind
have
of stuff?
that drafted out now
Okay, good.
to send out tomorrow.
All right, good.
Just want to double check with our
right,
communications team to make sure that it is formatted and looks
I think
right.
that's
and-
critical. I think
Yep,
that's critical.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, any other business or comments? Ms. McCall?
A belated question about Seesaw. So a parent has to have a device to participate, correct? They have to have the technology to do so, right? So we will have parents who,
They can do it on their phone.
Yes.
I believe the last data I've seen is we are, I think we're 85 to 90% that do have access to technology. That was a long time ago that we surveyed that. It may be different now, but we can follow up when we give the presentation about what perceptions we have about access gaps.
Okay. No other business. I'll ask for a motion and a second for adjournment. Moved by Mr. Siegel. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rowell. All in favor, say aye. We are adjourned at 7:36. Okay. Sure. Yep.